Today we're going to go over my Roth IRA portfolio and Robinhood for the month of July. So today is July 31st and we will be looking at my month-end results. So currently the portfolio stands at about $14,100, slightly over that, and we can see that we're up a little bit in the after-hour trading, about 0.5%, which was about $75, but up $334 for the day. That's about 2.5%. Really big jump. For some reason, tech stocks just decided to rebound. I know a lot of reports are coming out, quarterly statements for some of these companies, and people are liking what they're seeing, with a few exceptions, definitely. But let's look at some of the individual holdings. We have QQQM, which I have rather than QQQ for the slightly less expensive expense ratio with it. $8,900 there. We got SPY for $1,157 total, and VOO or VOO for $4,029. Let's look at some of our returns here. Percent change for the day. You can see that QQQM, which tracks the NASDAQ 100, is up about 3.5% for the day, which is incredible. Very, very rare that you see that kind of movement in a day, especially upwards. SPY and VOO, you can see, are very similar. They track the same S&P 500 fund, and they're up about a little over 2% for the day. Now, if we look at total return, you can see some of my profits on these. SPY was a recent grab that I started putting in the portfolio. I might just change it over to VOO since that's slightly less expensive. I've had VOO for a little bit. Then QQQM, you can see I have a good 17% change. All these numbers come after the fact of me transferring into Robinhood. I've had these for a couple of years now, run on about 3 years of having index funds. So that's not entirely true, but definitely a good thing to look at, especially I like tracking my equity over time, seeing how that changes. But let's look over here. So for contributions, I got a total of 720 contributions for 2024 tax year with an IRA match of $21.50. Now this total contribution does not include my contribution before transferring over to Robinhood, but we will touch on that. So I still probably have about 5,500 around there that I can contribute for the year, and we'll see how far we can get on that. As far as recurring investments go, I got weekly buys for VOO, SPY, and QQQM. I'm about 70% into the NASDAQ and 30% into the S&P 500. I like to keep that. The NASDAQ, it has more volatility, so I'm hoping for the long run that I'll be able to see larger gains out of that. But having exposure in the S&P 500 does allow me to breathe a little bit when the market's being a little irrational. And we can see some of our history here. We have a dividend that actually did not come through today, so it'll probably come through tomorrow. For SPY, it was a little late on the dividend, but we have $3.6 coming from that for the quarter. And then we can see some small contributions to my Roth I make. And this is normally just cash back I get from my credit cards here and there. And I like to just keep those coming in, funding the account. So I wanted to look at some of the charts. You can see that over the week, although we might be up, if you look at the month-long chart, which is what I'm concerned about, we're down about 0.5%. Now my portfolio value is larger than last month. I was at about 13,900, and the reason for that is I've been constantly contributing. I have about $42, $43 weekly buys that I put in. So you can imagine that's $160 at the end of the month that I've contributed. However, our portfolio is slightly down. Now we can look at this chart and it tells a little bit of a story. At the beginning of the month, we were just doing incredible. We were up, let's see, about almost 4% here. And it just kept rallying up, and then we saw a huge pullback in tech stocks. And that looked like that happened on July 1st, or July 11th rather. And then they had a pullback that next day, and they kind of maintained flat. They were going back and forth, kind of being a little inconsistent with what the market was thinking. And then after July 16th, we just took a bit of a nosedive from here. So we went from 14,658 up 3%, all the way to 14,114 and down 0.66%. So we can see a total difference of, about $400 over the course of one day, which for my portfolio is a big swing. And then we had some pullback and continue to go down. But recently we actually saw quite a big recovery in the last 2 days in the market. You can see July 30th was quite a low day as well. And this comes from Microsoft reporting earnings. And although they did great, the market kind of just was expecting a little more. Their AI expenditures were just incredibly high. We saw things like that with Meta as well. Now, although they're investing for the future of the company, that doesn't mean that the investments aren't showing up on the balance sheets. And nobody likes to see a tech company bleed several billions in AI chip expenditures alone. So a little bit of a turbulent month. I haven't seen a month like that in a long time where it decides to swing both back and forth. And we'll look at some charts for other stocks as well. But over the time since I have come from M1 Finance to Robinhood, we're still up 6%, and that's about $800 in the portfolio, and that's incredible. Some of that comes from dividends, but a lot of it comes from just constantly reinvesting and having the capital already into play. So one of the stocks I wanted to look at was Nvidia for the day. Obviously, this company just draws people in like flies. They're obsessed with it. We can see it's up 13% for the day and 3.5% after hours. I mean, being one of the largest holdings in my portfolio just because of weighted exposure in the NASDAQ, a little unsettling. I don't like to see things swing that much, although it does feel nice seeing the portfolio go up. But we can see over the course of the month what Nvidia looked like. So although they swung 13% in one day, they're still barely breaking positive for the month. They're at about 0.6% of movement, which for Nvidia especially, that's nothing impressive. I mean, this stock has been compounding. If you look over the last 3 months, we're looking at like 42.5% of growth year to date, 146%, or double the value year to date. I mean, when we look at a week-long gain of 0.6, we can see a lot of slowing down happening in the stock. And if you look at the chart, it tells a story a bit too. So let's look at the 5%. We saw this incredible growth here. And this is where a lot of the height of the speculation came about. And then people, you can see a little uneasiness going on here. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was a general message coming about Nvidia and further into other AI chip stocks, considering, I mean, these things are incredibly high value. People are banking on AI just being the future in these companies. And realistically, that could be the truth, and it probably a good chance it is. But do they deserve these valuations at this time? That's where I get a little iffy, and I'm not quite sure if I buy all that. So look at Nvidia. That was a interesting one, but another one I wanted to look at for the month was CrowdStrike. And if you had a phone, and especially an Apple phone, you saw what happened this month with CrowdStrike. We can see it starting July 15th. That must have been the day that the event happened. But CrowdStrike was doing great for the month. I mean, they were just rallying up. We saw like a pretty low start here and then just kept moving up for the month. And we can even look here. I mean, they were doing good. They were up 2% for the month, which is great for any stock. And then ending the month, they're down 39%, which is confusing. I mean, for anyone not knowing the news, that seems crazy. How does a company lose 40% of its valuation within a 1 month time span? And that's simply because CrowdStrike rolled out an update for Microsoft for its clients, and it simply crashed all the computers, and it wasn't an easy solution. IT had to manually reset every single computer, and companies like Boeing and Southwest Airlines, they were hit heavy by this and are suing CrowdStrike, and I wouldn't be surprised if they just stop using CrowdStrike in the future. Although they are a massive company, a mistake like that was simply just too big, and it impacted globally. I think there was just a massive global outage. It happened in the middle of the night, and even going into the morning, near noon, it was still occurring, and companies were still struggling. So now let's look at an all-time chart on my portfolio. Since I transferred it over from M1 Finance to Robinhood, this data did not track, but I have kept steady reports of it ever since I started, so I can still look at how my portfolio has moved over time. So we saw initially I started with $2,200 back in 2021 when I turned 18, and I consistently invested for a couple months. I was doing $90 a week just trying to offload some of that bank account into it. And then for a while I was flat. I wasn't contributing anything to my account. Fortunately, at this time, the stock market actually didn't see a lot of growth, so I kind of dodged a bullet by being lazy here. But after that, I wanted to pick up my pace. You can see a tax return here that I just put right into my portfolio. I didn't need that. I had enough cash in my bank account on hand. And then we saw some movement kind of going down in the market for a couple months. It was very tough. But then at the end of 2022, the market just absolutely kept rallying. I started contributing a lot to my account at this time. And then we can see additionally 2023, as we all know, was just an absolute massive year for the market. It rallied and it rallied. I wasn't putting from here to 2024, I didn't put $4,000 in the account. I mean, I maybe put 2,000 some, but the market just took off with it and I saw great returns at the time. And then starting at 2024, we're at about $9,000 there contributed and 10,942 in my account. And that just kept pushing up. We saw a lot of this, especially this growth here from Nvidia and other tech stocks that were being valued at that time. They were just jumping and jumping. And now we're seeing a little bit of pullback, perhaps a little flattening, but who knows? Nonetheless, this graph does tell a great story about my contributions over time. And now we can see that I have about $10,356 put into my account with a value of $14,139. And I keep track of my contributions here. So yeah, okay, portfolio value is slightly inaccurate there. So let's say 14,139. We're at a profit of about 3.7 thousand in the account, which is 36%. Now over 3 years, I mean, you could do just a simple mean of that, 12%, not a geometric average, but nonetheless, that's a pretty solid annual percent. But that does not take into account that a lot of my growth has happened in the later time, and this doesn't represent percentage change throughout my investing time, but rather just my current value versus the amount of money I've put in. So realistically, I've seen much more than a 30% change in my stock valuation. It's probably been more closer to 50 or 60. But because I didn't have all that money in my account right away and I kind of stacked it on near the latter end, that number is a little misleading. So nonetheless, I mean, great progress that we've continued making this account. Although we were a little down for the month, I continually invested, caught some low points, which I just dollar cost average into, and it has proven very well for me. And I think going into the rest of this year, I'm pretty optimistic, even though we're getting some shaky reports on inflation and employment. I'm not too worried. I think generally the market's working well. It's going to start stabilizing a little bit, which is what I would rather see, rather than moving 2.5% as an index in a day or 3.5% for the NASDAQ. That's a little extreme for me. I think that's kind of where you get into the speculation, and we're going to see huge pullbacks, which nobody likes to feel in their portfolio. So beyond that, there isn't too much more. I'm going to keep a close eye on it for the next month and report out to you guys. But hopefully some non-eventful news. Hopefully everything kind of cools down a little bit and we see some chilling to some of these crazy valuations. So thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next month.